Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 80 of the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. In the intro now, I have to be careful because I've launched a second podcast and I want to bring it to everybody's attention. It's called Forever Strength. And my co-host is my partner in the project Forever Strength. Her name is Bailey Lau. And it's a bit more of a shorter podcast with practical, everyday, basic information. So it's a little bit different than this one, whereas this podcast invariably ends up being really cool conversations with people in the industry, what's made them successful, and it ends up speaking to coaches. But if you're interested in the other podcast, shoot me a message on Instagram. But anyway, an example of that is Brandon Senn. He is the VP of Athlete Experience and the head coach at Kabuki Strength, which is a brand I've certainly looked up to, and I certainly think is one of the premier brands and growing brands in our industry. So we're going to get a little peek behind the curtain. It's great to have you on, Brandon.
Oh, Andrew, thanks, man. I'm super excited to be finishing my day here and chatting with you.
I held you up for a little bit of an extra, maybe close to an hour or so, but I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah. You and I were initially connected through my friend Daniel DeBrock, who is one of your team, and he had recommended me to you to appear as a speaker in Kabuki Education Week. So that went down in January. That was a smash success. I loved it, and I appreciate the opportunity. So let's actually dive into that a little bit, because that's a big event, and these virtual events are starting to grow now, but you guys started to set the bar for it. What goes into putting together an event of that scale? And but I guess because my own appearances in a lot of speaking engagements have grown, and I know there's a lot of interest in this sort of thing, for coaches who are interested in putting themselves in that position, what goes into finding speakers for that event? What sort of criteria is important to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So this last year was our second annual Kabuki Education Week, and we'll do it again this year. When we did it, we launched it during kind of the peak of the pandemic, when there weren't a lot of in-person events going on, and we just decided to ask a bunch of our friends and colleagues if they'd like to come together for a week-long event and speak. So it's the Kabuki Education Week. It is quite literally a week long. We invite anywhere from 50 to 60 speakers who we curate. And, they're typically, with this level of an event, we try to bring together like some really interesting people, and then some people who also, weren't, they didn't all say the same thing, which was important. I really, really enjoyed your talk this last year. And we hope to expand further beyond even just like, the general fitness type talks. They're hour-long talks where we hope to delve into other areas. But yeah, it was awesome. And as far as like what we look for, like the person, they have to be interesting, I think, number one. And they have to, doesn't matter if they're like a really great speaker or anything like that. They just have to, kind of want to come and share something of what they know. And they, have to be somewhat of a leader in their space, or at least kind of looked up to be. We've had, pro strength coaches on there. We've had researchers, we have coaches and trainers, and they all have something, kind of unique to offer. And that's really what we look for. And then the first year that we ran the Education Week, we just kind of looked at who we kind of looked up to in the industry, and people who we thought would be a great fit. The second year, we did the same thing, but then we also asked speakers who they thought would be a good fit. And that's really how we built it. And that's how we'll do it again. Andrew, you sent us a lot of really great choices. And unfortunately, by the time that we were kind of at that stage, we were pretty full, but we'll be doing the same thing this next year. We find that there's so many people out there that we might not intimately know, but our speakers know, and it's a great way for that whole group to network and to get exposure. And it's very, most speakers sit through a lot of the other speakers as well. So it's great to get exposure for them and to kind of learn who else is out there and what ideas they have. If you're a coach who wants to get involved with it, or events like that, you kind of have to have something that you can offer them, in terms of things that are interesting. And because we're not, we typically don't look for just like, I don't want to discredit anything that anyone does, so I don't really know how to phrase that, but they just have to be kind of like I hate the term thought leaders too. I always think it's, I think it's kind of silly, but they kind of have to be that person who's, kind of a leader in that space. So, yeah, there's, by nature of having, 60 people come together, we're afforded to have a very diverse set of like people from different backgrounds. So there's not one type that we look for. In fact, over time, we'll probably try to intentionally look for different types of people too. So I don't really know if that's a good answer, but
it's a great answer. And it parallels. So I somewhat frequently get people, asking, and often it's people that I have never met before, just show up and go, "Hey, are you looking for podcast guests and all this sort of stuff?" And I always politely say no. I as a default, if someone asks to come on the podcast, I say no. But really, the decision criteria for finding guests, I've rarely explained it publicly because I kind of have been keeping it a mystery, but I'll kind of reveal it here because it parallels this. Is it someone who has developed a pretty strong reputation in education within the fitness industry, right?
yeah.
So oftentimes, not every single one of the guests I've ever had is a speaker at events. The vast majority of them are. That's a really good bar. A good example of an exception recently, I just had Eric Roberts on the podcast. So Eric has a larger social media following than virtually anybody else who I've ever had on here, especially with the explosion of his TikTok, which people might be like, okay, that's silly, TikTok song and dance. This guy's reaching a lot of people, and he does it at such an extremely proficient level that he's an authority and very, very skilled in that space. So it made for a really good conversation. But what I try to nudge people into doing is, and it's any coach who's asking me about career growth, is what are the things that you can do to, and this is what my presentation was about, really for Kabuki, is look at all these people in the industry that you look up to, who you admire, who you would listen to on a podcast, and what put them there. The publications that they've written for, the fact that they put effort into their own writing. Do they host a podcast of their own? Do they have a very successful YouTube channel? Have they built or worked in a leadership capacity for a reputable brand in the industry? That's a very big part of you, right? You're VP within Kabuki Strength, right? That gives you credibility. And that's the first box to check as to why you're kind of here. And these things don't happen quickly or overnight. And a lot of people, I think, they think, okay, well, if I only appear on these podcasts, or if I get to speak at one of these events, that's going to make me. No, it works in reverse. It's, you do all the other work, and it may take quite a bit of time. So that way you're establishing all this credibility and authority, and these are the key words here, to the point where people start asking you to appear regularly on podcasts, or you get asked all of a sudden do speaking engagements. And I love what you guys are doing with Kabuki, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with my friend Nick Lamb. He's beginning to speak more and more, and he's the guy behind, him and his partner Derek Mendoza do Raise the Bar, which Chris Duffin was just at. That's where I actually got to meet and hang out with Chris. But Nick also does the Recovery and Sleep Summit, which is also a big virtual event over 4 days. And like yours, I gave him a long list of people that I think are really great from different kind of backgrounds. And this is not something I'm interested in people seeing or getting credit for or whatever, but I like taking people I think, hey, these are proven educators, awesome people, may not necessarily have large social media followings. Let's connect them up and get them in front of more people. And I absolutely love that. And I'm not interested in waving it around like, hey guys, give me points for doing this. I just like helping people.
Yeah. That's right, because those are the people that you don't really find unless you know them. There's for every high profile strength coach online, there's 20 that are better that you'll never hear of because they're not active. I've called over time. I used to be a whole lot more active in social media than I currently am, but there's a lot of guys like, not to say like myself, but a lot of people who aren't super active anymore, but are still like doing things at a reasonably high level. And so, yeah, I think it's really important that if you do know people like that, give them a seat.
Well, you just hit on something that I wanted to go into, and it's the fact that, now with your role with Kabuki, you're not aggressively engaged with social media to the point where you're trying to grow an individual brand. Was that the opportunity with Kabuki created in such a way that you no longer felt you needed to do much with social media, or is Kabuki just so demanding of your time that You don't want the dueling competition of the things. And I'll even throw this sort of question at you. Let's say tomorrow you could start the day with 1 million real followers, engaged followers. Would you even want that, given where you are with your career?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I have some opinions on that too, but I think it's a little bit of everything you said. I Social media to me, when I started it, was always kind of a means to an end. I'm not so interested in having a big following. I know a lot of people who have big followings, and I know how their days work, and I don't really want my day to work that way. That's a big motivator for me. I also have found that, and this is just me, that the more that I focused on my own social media, and it's just my mentality of how I went about it, I just felt less grounded in just my every awareness and, everything else I was doing. And that's not, I don't know if that's by nature of social media or not, but I was always interested in sharing ideas about things. I've actually wanted to get back into social media to do that, because I'm finding that I'm interested in a lot of different things than I was when I was coaching, 50 plus people all the time. And when I was so engaged as a coach, I still have clients, but I'm not really, I only really take on people that are like, that I think would be fun to work with at this point. And I also, I'm really focused on our company's social media. I don't, so it would be really hard for me to be so focused on both my own and in our virtual coaching or supporting those things. So if I had 1 million followers, I would not know what to do with them, to be honest with you. I would hope it's, I just know like our coaches here are fantastic. They're, not a lot of people know of them, but they are some of the smartest people that I've met. They might not have formal education, but some of them do, some of them don't. But some of them are starting to get slightly bigger social media followings. For a long time, I had the biggest in our coaches circle at like 6,000 people. And it's weird because I don't post anything, but my follower count is slowly going down. Like, I think people just remember me and they're like, oh yeah, I don't like that guy, I want to unfollow him. But I hear like some of the things that they're like, how do I respond to this guy who says this thing? And I'm like, man, like if I had 1 million people and 1% of them were that person, I would probably personally struggle with it. So if I had the opportunity to have 1 million of them, I honestly would not know what to do.
And I've posed that question kind of in my own mind, and my answer is no, I would not want 1 million followers,
Mm-hmm.
because I've now tipped past the point where I understand just how much of your time and your focus and how troublesome it can be to be, for lack of a better way of saying, almost like there's addiction, sort of a tricky word, but
Yeah.
gone into it because you have to be very intentional with how you embrace it. And in an effort to engage, I notice that I'm on it more than I want to be. Now I coach full time and I'm thankfully very busy. That pulls me out of it. And I deliberately didn't draw attention to something that happened recently, but I bumped up against a sort of an echo chamber within the industry. It's a smaller echo chamber that have a very different philosophy about how to create content and engage. And their attitude is misinformation is bad. So therefore, this may be straw manning it, but our tactics of tearing down and attacking and swarming accounts and people who do not capitulate because this person said something that we didn't agree with. Even though in the particular example that I first saw, it's a friend of mine who I think is very well intentioned. So this community didn't like a post that I made basically highlighting how this behavior is still bullying. Now, I'm big on countering misinformation, really, really big on it. I just don't think that it helps in the grander scheme of things to have a group that, well, if someone does something you don't like, you post them up, and then of course the minions go in and into attack.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of had to fend a little bit of that off, and it was stressful and a bit of a distraction. And thankfully it all worked out fine in the end, because I don't want all these other young emerging coaches to be afraid of this kind of behavior.
Mhm.
And they seem to celebrate creating that fear around people so that way people won't post misinformation. They're sort of, that's the
Yeah.
narrative right now. And it's a tricky thing, but my attitude is I look at, someone like a Sam Spinelli. And this is example I've given. Sam's a friend. Sam's got 400,000 followers. And Sam, every once in a while, will take a direct shot at a verifiable charlatan, right? He'll
Mhm.
sometimes, counter something that I'm not going to say names. Actually, fuck it. I'll just put it out there. Like, not a lot of people love Squat U, super popular brand, whatever. But the guy behind Squat U, from what I've seen, posts a lot of things that are, fear of movement, kinesiophobia, right? So Sam has sort of taken the high road and countered some of the things directly, and I've seen him, do other things. But Sam overwhelmingly posts really positive, direct information, and he's built a massive following with a good attitude, and it's going to reach more people and help more people. Whereas his reach combined is vastly larger than this entire echo chamber ecosystem that is, behaves in this way. So, I mean, we all have different philosophies, but, I look at this sort of stuff and I realize, like, with my following, which is, just on the edge of 45,000 right now and growing very rapidly, I fully believe it'll easily hit 100,000 within a few years. I'm just going, holy shit, this is a lot to deal with. I can't imagine what a
Yeah.
million feels like.
It'd be
Anybody
crazy.
who's wishing for this sort of stuff, you don't understand what's coming with it.
Yeah.
But I think the real thing here is accumulating the things that back it up. So again, I think if you're interested in developing, you becoming a speaker, educator, having becoming a quote leader in the industry, you might want to back it up with something a little bit deeper than just social media.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
there may come a point where you want to step away from your social media.
Yeah, well, I think you have to do it right too. I think everything you just said is exactly right. I saw some of the stuff that you had posted recently on that too, and it did kind of click with me too because I get jumping on people for misinformation, but more important to me is the intent of that person sharing their misinformation. If they genuinely, if they, I just never see it as like such negative intent, and as I feel like I'm very much a coach at heart. I'm like, okay, and I want to then coach that person versus like rally the troops behind it. I understand that controversy is a very easy way to become popular. It's just not how I would want to become popular on social media. To everything I'm saying too, if I was running my own business, I would be aggressively focused on running my social media very well, and growing it as rapidly as I could, but not growing it so that I grew it with a counter group that didn't like me, because for every big profile that you have who has a big opinion, they grow their following, but they also grow a following that really does not like them because of the way that they handle things. And so I would never encourage somebody to go that route. But yeah, I think everything you said is exactly right.
Yeah, and again, there's going to be different people with different philosophies. And I think what underpins it all is most people value mostly the same things. It's just sometimes those things that we value are in different proportions, which can seem like on the surface, very different approaches. And
Well, one of the last things to say on social media, well, unless you ask me another question, is I think it's such a poor medium too. It's a great medium for connecting, and it's a great media for keeping you on the medium. But if you have a conversation with one of these people who you different opinions, you probably more or less have the same opinion on a lot of it. There's big, drawing lines in the sand people, but so many coaches are going to say the exact same thing, and if it's presented in a certain way to them, they're likely to agree in more areas than not. And I don't think that that's highlighted in social media.
And ultimately with this incident, and again, I deliberately didn't want to draw a lot of attention to it because I felt, okay, if the coaches that follow me saw this, then they would become very fearful about posting things. And I think the vast majority are overtly well-intentioned. I did make the effort to have a conversation behind the scenes, which I think is important. Because I think when you're being combative and aggressive in a public view, I think the goal really is more about making a display of proving that the other person is wrong versus a genuine attempt to create communication. And another tactic that sort of appeared with this is, going in very, very aggressively, even if it's potentially valid counterpoints. If you go in very aggressively and then someone, I mean, I deleted comments because I felt that the approach was very aggressive. And then of course, all of a sudden my profile and my post is being shared up in these stories with the deliberate understanding and attempt to drive their followers in to attack and harass, which then is what happened. So any of the accounts that directly harassed, gone. I blocked them, deleted their stuff immediately. I don't tolerate it, don't care why. But one of the key figures in it, I had a very nuanced, thoughtful conversation and realized we actually see the world mostly in the same way. We just kind of prioritize slightly different tactics, which made peace and made the problem more or less vanish. And the other thing is, if this happens, guess what? If you don't react, if you just kind of let it go, they'll burn themselves out. They'll move on to a next target, and they'll keep up what they're doing, and they'll mostly forget about you. Right?
Yeah, it's dogs barking at each other through a fence. There's so many like kind of funny videos that go around of like two little dogs going after each other. As soon as the fence is open, they're like, well, okay, that's not, and then it closes and then they're right back at it. That social media, in a sense, for a lot of people is that fence, unfortunately.
Totally, right? And imagine, Chris Duffin is a really bloody nice guy. And can you imagine, I'm sure occasionally someone pops up and probably runs their mouth at Chris, even as nice as he is. Yeah. I would love to see that same person stand face to face with Chris in person and say the same thing.
Don't do it. Yeah. Don't do it.
Never in a million years. So let's have some fun here with this one. Ultimately, you've accomplished a lot in your career. And I know you came through as a competitive powerlifter, and you've done writing. There's writing on your website. What's the value system behind what you've achieved? And where do you want to take your career? What are your goals?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do find that right now I'm in a pretty transitional point in what I value or what motivates me. The number one thing that I am is for sure a coach. But I'm not just a coach of powerlifters anymore. I'm much more interested in leadership right now and kind of running our business than I am in learning more about strength training and because I'm just very realistic too. Like I feel like I'm by nature very humble, but I feel like I know a lot about training. I feel like to know the next 5% of nuance would take more time than I'm willing to put into it. And I don't think it would deliver any more than what I'm capable of delivering. So it's more of a point of diminishing returns for me. Like I'm someone who has a lot of hobbies. Once I feel like I've figured out a lot of it, I really feel like I want to, tread lightly on how I talk about myself, because I really do not have any form of ego. But I just find that I'm very curious by nature too. So if I get to a point where I'm like, yeah, okay, this is kind of how it works, and I'm usually like on to the next thing. But I'm very passionate about helping people. I'm very passionate about helping youth athletes and coaching people who want to be coached. And that form now, that's what I've done the past 10 years here and through my career. And now it's my role as a coach is turning more into a leader for our team and for our business. That's what I'm motivated the most by now is learning those skills, learning what being a better leader is, and figuring out, there's so many parallels between running a business and periodizing a training plan. From the point of inception to the point of, your competition or your testing date is all very similar. It's just in a different pen stroke. So I'm very, very interested by that. And that's what I find, with what I've been very fortunate in my career to more or less do what I want. A lot of it's right time at the right place. I was in the gym that started as Kabuki strength. I could very easily be off doing something else. But I've been very fortunate with that, and I'm now I feel like I've always been a coach. I've always been a very empathetic leader as well. With my clients or with others. And that's something that I'm trying to develop more skills now to to coach other people in different ways, and for that is to me is leadership. So that's what I'm most interested in now is becoming a better leader.
So you hit on something big, and I wanted to bring it back to it about how many people will continue to study the things that they already know. They'll stay within their comfort zones, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's various aspects of movement, or the core skills, the technical skills of training, right? And how many people have sat down and read a book about coaching? And I'm not talking about another book on how to coach the lower body movement systems, or like any of the technical training aspects. I'm talking about the language. Like, let's look at Nick Winkelman's book, The Language of Coaching, which honestly, it's one of my favorites. I've talked a lot about. I've had Nick on. He was at Raise the Bar as well, and I really enjoyed that book. Now, the first section is so neuroscience heavy. And again, I've done post-secondary, life science and physics in university, at least 1 year of it before I pivoted to business. So this is not stuff that I last saw in grade 10. But that to me was, okay, that's challenging to read. That's tough. Okay, good. It stretches me out of my comfort zone. And this is the key here, stretching you out of your comfort zone. But then when we get into, the science and everything he talks about, cueing, external versus internal cueing and analogy and stuff, I'm like, this stuff's fantastic. This is really helpful. I've never heard it presented this way before. Yeah. And I like reading books on various aspects of business, various aspects of coaching, marketing, and the things that aren't necessarily taught to trainers early in their careers. Leadership, you strike me as someone who's probably reading about the stuff. What are some of the books you've enjoyed on leadership?
The one that I have, I might have it in my bag, or I might have left it at home. The one that's been the most important for me is the 4 disciplines of execution. And if you ask me what the 4 disciplines are now off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. But there's a big difference between planning things, over planning, thinking you're being productive versus actually being productive and actually executing. There's a massive gap between those things. You can be busy and feel productive and get nothing done. And that's something that I had to learn at one point. I'm still, it's because so many things that take your attention. But it's a very easy trap to fall into and to not make progress. So I think that's, that is probably the most important one, I would say, that for me that has helped.
Oh, I haven't talked about books nearly as much on the newer version of the podcast, last 80 episodes versus the old 150 when Guido was still my co-host. But there's a whole bunch of leadership books I like, and then there's some that I kind of think, all right, this is really for kind of someone who's probably in your position where you have a lot of people under you. But I really like Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game, and just in terms of big picture perspective on, kind of the business you want to be in, the legacy you want to leave. So that one's a big one for me. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. I'll have to look that up. I love to collect books and I hate to finish them and read them. I'm also, I get into books and I kind of feel like I know where it's headed, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to spend the time doing it. But there's other ones that are really captivating and interesting. I used to be very interested with like books about systems and organizing things and the likes, and I found that they all say the same thing, more or less. Like every once in a while you get something that's kind of off the cuff. I'm like, there's some stuff here. But a lot of it is regurgitated. It's all the similar processes of plan, do, and deploy, or whatever kind of pick your flavor of that. But yeah, I would be very. I certainly don't feel like I'm a master of many things. I'm not a master of leadership, but it's something I'm very interested in right now, at least in the current phase of my career.
You probably learn as much just by simply immersing yourself in the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Leaning on the people skills that you've developed and that you continue to work on and develop, right? Because you're responsible for a team, their livelihoods, and that team are individually responsible for the roster of clients that they have. So there's a big cascade of the people whose lives you are directly impacting.
I would tell you right now, you're exactly right. And I actually learn so much more from my wife than I have from any books. So it's funny. She's a very high achieving professional in the corporate setting, and she works currently with a team of 200 people that she leads. And I always feel like a small fry when I talk to her, because we have our kind of modest, more or less startup company here. And so I go to her with like ideas, and then she's like, no, like, here's how like these things work. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. It's always so, for any good like thing that I think of is she's usually a sounding board for it. So I've, she's helped me with more than any other point of formal education or book ever has, for sure. So
I think one of the underpinnings to this entire conversation is you're going to get a very robust experience and a lot of knowledge and information if you get a diverse array of ideas from different sources and different people, and you're receptive to and open to those experiences.
Yeah. I always think too, like, I think that's gaining more experience is so important, in having diverse experiences with people is very important, but it's so important to have an objective view too, of like trying to understand where they're coming from, or why they're saying what they are, because you can learn a whole lot more about what someone says if you can understand intent than just what their words are. And that to me is something that I'm always trying to be mindful of, is, okay, I hear what you're saying. Well, what? And I'm not necessarily going to ask you, why are you telling me that? Because that sounds combative, but I'm trying to understand your motives for telling me the thing that you're telling me, because very rarely people are so clearly expressive of what they want from you or what they think. And you have to develop some of these soft skills for interpretation. And that's what you get as a coach too. And that's why I think, a good coach should be a leader, and a good leader should be a good coach, I think. And I think that's why I enjoy both of those things.
This has been a real pleasure to talk to you. I want to make sure that people know how to find, because as you said, you haven't necessarily been crazy active with your social media to this point, but you're interested in it. Where can people find more of your work? And obviously, it's the sort of thing where, I don't want 50 people knocking on your door going, hey, I want to be a part of Kabuki Education Week next year. But the reality is that, valuable connections of people who've worked really hard to put themselves in that position. I want people to know who you are, and it may create great future opportunities for them, because they may be very valuable to you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mind people emailing me. My email is brandon@kabukistrength.com. I do not as much in-person speaking this year as I have previously. Luckily, our team here is fantastic and has been able to step up and lead a lot of our in-person events. But I have various speaking events I do. I'll be at the next Nick Lamb, his next, I can't remember the name of the summit. It might be another recovery summit.
I just had him on. He's literally the last guest. And yeah, I was with him. We were talking about this. It's like, when are you going to rename this thing? Because it's the Recovery and Sleep Summit.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the topics are so vastly beyond that narrow niche. That's what he operates in, that he's like, thinks he knows he needs to like rebrand it, right? Because Kabuki Education Week has a very broad umbrella. And so he's very aware of it, because this thing's got to be a big event too. There's a ton of good speakers. And for anybody who is listening, so you're in the lineup, I'm in the lineup. This thing is running May 12th through 15th virtually. Shoot me a message. I'll literally give you the link for it, easy, because hey, it's free. And I'm going to shout this one out too. If anybody is in the Minneapolis area or looking for something in person, I'm giving a small talk. It's a shorter one at the Resistance Exercise Conference. So Brad Schoenfeld and Stu Phillips are two of the headliners. My pal Luke Carlson, who was on recently, he's kind of the head of this thing. And it's a really cool event. And I was really honored to be invited down to come and speak at it. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would love to see you there. If not, come check out me and Brandon on the Recovery and Sleep Summit. That'd be great to have you guys.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. Still have a whole lot of work to do to figure out what I'm going to talk about, but I'll figure out something.
Mine is 99% done, and I was having trouble with the flow at the conclusion. And then I was in the shower today, and it's like click, click, boom, and all of the missing pieces just fell.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
So good.
That happens to me like right before I'm about to fall asleep. I always have to have like a notepad near me, so I'm like, write that down so brain doesn't have to remember.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny because this is in my presentation. My presentation for this thing is it's about growing an engaged social media following, right? And again,
Nice.
obviously, pitfalls to it too. We go over that, but there is a little section there about idea creation and in the shower. And I read this somewhere once, and it makes so much sense. It's pretty much the only place that we don't take our cell phones anymore, right?
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
some people literally will stick them on the wall and they've got them in the fucking shower, which is to me
Yeah.
wild. But I think that may be part of it, but it seems to be a very fertile ground for ideas. And I've noticed it's and I've come up with article concepts in the shower a lot, and it's just been good. So don't skip your daily shower.
Yeah. Yeah. For more reasons than not.
for a lot of reasons. And then your Instagram for people to find you there.
It's just Brandon _Senn, SENN. If anybody happens to want to connect.
Awesome. I genuinely hope they do. I am passionate about these connections across the industry and people knowing about people who are doing good work. All of the big things that have happened in my career. I saw an email pop up from my editor at Muscle and Fitness magazine, and I'm like, holy shit! I never even dreamed of writing for Muscle Fitness. Now that's a reality. I've got a second article in the works there, and that's a connection because a bunch of people who I've met in my travels who become my friends write for them or have connected, and then turn around and created that connection that I embraced when the opportunity arose.
I know you're trying to kick me off here, but what I was just going to say, it's actually really important for young coaches. It's something that I didn't realize until much later on in my career, but networking is one of the most powerful catalysts that you have. And it's not like going to a cocktail party and trying to make small talk. It is about, trying to make sincere connections with people. But I didn't understand networking until probably a few years ago, because I was unintentionally of the mindset, well, I could just do this. I can do this. I don't really need to ask somebody or talk to, I don't need to consult or, talk to this other person about this. But, networking is very, very important, I think, if you want to grow as a coach and as a business, for sure. Just as you said, there's so many opportunities that you would never think are actual possibilities that will fall into your lap because of it.
I'll give a specific example, right? I have a ton of speaking engagements. It started in August of last year. Before that, I wasn't doing anything. And then Kabuki, and then several more coming up. And I went to a few events in 2017 is when I started. And at an event in Kansas City, I met my friends Jeff Aker and Tim Arndt. Now, those guys weren't the speakers. They weren't the big names in the industry. Well, Jeff Aker turned out to be from Calgary, and he's the local head of the NSCA. So I've since gone to 2 of his provincial clinics, and now I'm speaking at the one here, June 4th in Edmonton. If you're awesome. Edmonton, come hang out there. I've got a really cool one. It's going to be on being a fitness writer. My friend Tim Arndt, I went to his event in Spokane 2 years in a row. And then during the pandemic, when shit was really crazy last August, he asked if I would come down. It was a bit of a headache coming out from Canada. I embraced it, and I got a speaking engagement there. Meeting these guys and adding them to Facebook when I first met them, I had no intent of, how can I benefit from this? There's some like-minded people I enjoyed meeting. And then again, with Daniel, I met him at a RP event, which would have been in 2018 in Calgary. And so had him on social media, and then we've interacted back and forth. And it was him that led me to, put me in front of you, which led to Kabuki. Yeah. And these are people who, again, Brandon is really growing in the industry now and doing cool stuff and writing for a lot of big publications. When I met him, he wasn't in those places. So you never know. And it's not just about going and making sure you spend some time with Chris Duff. And if you meet him at an event, by the way, if you get a chance to meet Chris, hang out with him, because he's quirky. You get him going, but he can often just kind of like want quiet time off to himself, and not everybody's like swarming him. And I think maybe some people are intimidated because he's literally just one of the strongest humans to ever live. And he's actually one of the nicest guys, and I got a bunch of one-on-one time with him, right? That was super. So take advantage of meeting people who've accomplished a lot, but also look at the person who's sitting next to you metaphorically at these events. You don't know where they're from or where they're going. And it's not about, hey, how can I benefit from all this stuff? Support these people, enjoy it, because I love going to this kind of stuff. And I couldn't even imagine all of the good things that have happened in my career simply because I put myself in those environments.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. it is you really just don't realize what else could happen, but it does take intentional effort, networking and the likes for me is challenging just because I tend to be more reserved in public settings. I like to talk right now if I'm talking to you, but I will never go up to somebody and be like, so what do you do? What do you, it is a it's a big struggle for me, but it does take a lot of intentional effort. And same thing with writing. You said this really well the first time I talked to you. I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but you talked about writing articles as being like a career, like adding to your career. Yeah, your career capital. And it's exactly right. Like I was telling you about, an opportunity that just kind of fell into my lap because of an article that I wrote, years ago. I wrote an article on auto regulation like 5 years ago, and a publisher reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, you want to turn this thing into a book?" I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure, maybe. That sounds good." But you just don't know unless you do those things. So like, even for a lot of young coaches, like you just have to do stuff, share things, meet people, and of course, figure out how to keep the lights on and do whatever you have to. But you really got to go like above and beyond with all of those things. I think you're a great example of it. You are, I really feel like you crush social media. I think you're probably one of the best, among other things, probably one of the best resources that people could look to for like how to actually do it well. So at least people that I know, you do it and you speak on it well too. You can teach other people to do it.
And I appreciate it because I do believe in being a good role model there, because I think there are a lot of coaches out there who aspire. And again, I don't think everybody needs the massive following, but I also, I make fun of this too. It's like, you'll also be told you don't need, a large social media following by people who have a large social media following.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, again, there are headaches and pitfalls that come with it. And it certainly can take a lot of very intentional work, but it is yielded some pretty impressive rewards. But there are also things that I value, and not everybody values the same thing. You are in a leadership position within a company that doesn't necessitate that large social media brand, whereas I'm very much an individual brand, and it has benefited me immensely in terms of my ability to speak at conferences and get writing opportunities and attract rather effortlessly people who want to mentor with me, who want to do my online coaching and in-person coaching because of the scope of the social media following.
I totally agree. Even for our coaches here, like it's not so crucial for them to have big followings because we get clients and we send them to them, but I am a huge advocate for them to have their own personal brands. Like people need to know who you are in a good way. And that's why I had talked to you previously about, and we'll probably progress with this with you, but having you either come down or do a virtual like mentorship with these guys about how you built your brand. Cause they're not experts in that, but we express how important it is. So even like, I am very fortunate that I'm not forced to have a large social media. I guarantee, like if sort of like you, I guarantee you run your own social media kind of like a business. Like you plan it, you know what you're doing every day. You know cause and effect of a lot of things, and that's probably the approach that other people should take. Well, I can't give advice to that because I'm not that. I'll share a picture of the things that I barbecue or our new puppy, but
well, that stuff's important too, because that's part of people knowing who you are, because people follow you because they want to have a relationship with you, right? They want to feel connected to you. And think of the big accounts, like look at some of the crazy shit that Chris is always sharing, right? He's working out on the back of that truck, or he's messing with stuff. And what is he like put together the front of his house recently? And that's going to really appeal to, powerlifters are going to love him. But you get anybody who's like into DIY type stuff, they're going to be like, oh man, this guy's it. This is the person I need to connect with, right? I feel that we're part of the same tribe. So there is an importance in letting people know a lot about you, right? Me, I'm okay. I can barbecue a good steak, but I'm not a connoisseur when it comes to the barbecue. And I've got a cat. Like I have a ton of ladies in my DMs who love my cat Ozzy.
Yeah, I believe that.
Right. My girlfriend's like, well, these girls in your DMs are like, these ladies they're fans of the cat. Right. Keep me out of trouble. Anyway, brother, I really hope that people will go check out your media, go follow Brandon. And for anybody who may have found me on the podcast for the first time through Brandon's media, well, I had Chris Duffin on recently as well. So you might want to go start there. Scroll back.
Sweet.
And if you like this, look at who else I've had as guests. I've had a lot of the who's who of the industry. You might want to stick around. I got to earn the subscription, but I hope that you'll check out more. And thank you for continually tuning in for my longtime listeners. Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me.